What you see on the screen before you is every bow-tanking Yamato main's wildest fantasy rendered in real pixels. This is the legendary tier IJN hybrid battleship Aki, which is available in the December 2025 update to World of Warships Legends, but only if you get lucky enough to pull it out of a mystic chest. And of course, the only way you can get a mystic chest is by buying either a mystic box or a mystic lantern and hoping one of those drops a mystic chest. And then from there, you may get the incomparable, you may get the Marceau, or you may get this thing. But if that sounds daunting to you, and if it sounds like a waste of money, don't worry. It was announced that the Aki will return next year in 2026 as a Bureau project. No real time frame for that other than 2026. Could be earlier in the year, could be late in the year. Who knows? In any case, this ship will be widely obtainable by everybody at some point in the near future, even if it is somewhat, or a lot, prohibitive to get now. Now, this is essentially a copy-paste of the Yamato, with the main difference being that the rear turret has been removed and patched over with a flight deck so small that it requires catapults to launch the planes into the air. And we'll get into some of the specs on this thing. I don't think it's worth going into as much granular detail as I usually do, because mostly this is a copy-paste of Yamato with some key differences. But before we get into that, I'll show you my commander build. I've got Takagi at the helm. Now, there's other choices, of course. You could use the new IJN battleship commander Ozawa. He's designed for the hybrid battleship line, but most of his skills are meant to buff the efficacy of the planes, specifically the range of the airstrike, the plane HP, the plane speed, those kind of things. Nothing really to speak of to buff the plane alpha, and at the end of the day, I think your main battery guns on this ship, and probably the line as a whole, are still going to be the bread and butter. So somebody like Takagi, who can spec into the efficacy of the guns through skills like flammable cannoneer or marksman, I would think he's probably more valuable and better to use as the commander on a ship like this. After all, these are Yamato guns, 460mm guns, but only 6 of them. And, well, you know, they're good. Just ask the Iwami out there as he gets double citadeled for our first salvo and we do 32,000 damage. These are the same as Yamato guns except for a couple parameters on this ship with the same Takagi build that I have on Yamato. We have 19.9 kilometer range on the main battery. Yamato, I think, has 20.5, so this is a little bit shorter. And then the reload time with the reload mod is 25.2 seconds on the Aki, whereas on the Yamato it's 27. Other than that, the HE damage, the AP damage, those are exactly the same as Yamato's, although I don't know that you should ever really shoot HE in the Yamato or this thing. Forget about the fact that it does drop torpedoes from the sky. We're going to end this battle with 13 torpedoes hit and a grand total of 0 floods. One thing that's missing from the specs page on the ship is the flood chance on these torpedoes. I don't see it anywhere, but I can tell you they do hit like pillows. The maximum simulated damage is 4,300, and keep in mind, if you're launching these at battleships, they all have torpedo damage reduction. Aki itself has a whopping 55% torpedo damage reduction, and you'll see what that looks like because we're about to launch an airstrike at the enemy Aki out there. You'll see when the torpedoes make contact that at least one of them only does a grand total of 1,700 damage. Not exactly earth-shattering numbers there. But if this sounds like I'm complaining about the damage output on the torpedoes, I'm really not. I think it needs to be that low because these airstrikes feature 4 planes which drop 3 torpedoes each for a grand total of 12 torpedoes per drop. There's no way they can be allowed to have high alpha with that many torpedoes in one drop. Now, as you might have noticed, though, the reticle on the torpedo drop indicator is gigantic. These torpedoes create a spread so huge that even if you're launching them at a broadside battleship, I'm not sure it's physically possible for every single one to hit. And when they do hit, of course, the damage is not spectacular, but it does add up over time. And if you get floods, good for you, but I really haven't gotten a lot while I've been playing this ship. I really wish we knew what the flooding chance was, but we don't. So those are basically the main differences between this thing and Yamato, although we should point out that for some reason, and I really don't know why this is, but Aki gets 102,300 HP, whereas Yamato gets 90,000 even. And on top of that, Aki gets 3 heals base, and Yamato only gets 2. But wait, there's more. The Aki heals restore 511 HP per second for a total of 28 seconds. Yamato's, with 1 less heal base, keep in mind, restore 449 HP for a duration of 28 seconds. I don't know why this is. The Yamato, I think, is more in need of heals than this thing is. But I'm not part of the Ministry of Balance, so I couldn't tell you. All I'll say is I think it's long past time Yamato and GK both get buffed to have 3 heals base, just like everything else. I don't know what the justification is for them only having 2, while a copy-paste of Yamato with a flight deck on the rear gets 3. I don't get it, but it is what it is. In any case, what we have here is a battleship that is basically scientifically designed to alleviate one common complaint that I hear every now and then from battleship mains. Certain battleship mains, of course. Not all of them are potatoes, but I feel like the ones who make this complaint are, if they're not potatoes, then at least they're not maybe thinking about this thinking man's action game as much as they should be. You've heard the complaints before. I certainly have. Sometimes you'll get a person who watches a video on YouTube or a stream and says something along the lines of, "Wow, how do you get so many broadsides with your battleships? Most ships do not just sit there and give me broadside. I don't get as lucky as you. You are fighting paid actors." That's basically the content of the complaint. And, well, I'll put it this way. Sometimes enemy ships will give you broadside for no reason whatsoever, and then you can happily take advantage of that. But the whole fun of playing a battleship, at least for me, is figuring out where can I put the battleship on the map to access the broadsides of the enemy ships as they're pushing toward an objective or toward my teammates or some sort of goal like that. That's my whole enjoyment of playing battleships, and over the years I feel like I've gotten fairly good at it. So it's not about sitting still and relying on the enemy team to give you broadside, it's about taking the broadside by moving your ship into optimal positions. But with the Aki, you don't really have to worry about that kind of calculus, do you? No, of course you don't, because you've got 6 Yamato 460mm guns that can overmatch 32 millimeters of armor. And so if you've got some ship pushing bow into you, just shoot at their bow armor. It's probably 32, you'll go right through it, you'll deal decent damage, and then their broadsides will be broadside to your airstrikes. So you just drop the planes on their side. The planes won't hit for a tremendous amount of damage, but they will still do damage, and over time, the guns and the planes together will add up to a lot. So no broadside, no problem. Just sit still, bow tank, reverse, overmatch, planes. That is the strategy for the Aki. And I think that's a pretty low skill floor strategy, one that I really don't like. I'm not a fan of the design of this ship, if you can't tell. I predict that as time goes on and more people acquire this ship, every time I see one in a battle on either the red or the blue team, I'm pretty confident I will be able to assume that it is going to be a poorly played ship. At this point in time, without the wide proliferation of the Aki, I think the Yamato and the Shimakaze together take the cake for the worst played ships on average at legendary tier, and the Aki is about to join them in that distinguished pantheon of potato vessels sometime in the future. Mark my words, it's gonna happen. Now, this battle is drawing to a close. For the entirety of it, what we tried to do was go out on a flank so we could minimize the angles of enemy fire and get broadsides on enemy ships. We've been fairly successful in that, getting 7 citadels, 206,000 damage, but now we're at the end of our rope with only 14,000 HP left. So it's just about doing whatever we can before this battle ends, and of course we're in a scenario where we've got to reverse away from this incomparable. And, well, you know, battleship guns, they aren't exactly the most accurate all the time. Only 2 shells there, and for the incomparables part, only 2 shells on us for 2 overpens. So we will be able to escape this by the skin of our teeth with only 499 HP, but we're not going to be lasting too much longer. There is a GK over there in the Charlie cap, and if we get spotted, he's likely going to be able to shoot at us. One last airstrike. We have 12 torpedoes hit now. We're going to end up with 13 and about 219,000 damage. So this is obviously a pretty good ship, very effective at dealing damage, very easy to play in my opinion, and I can see why it would appeal to a wide section of the player base out there, but I don't think more planes like this in the game is necessarily a good thing. But I will say one thing. I don't think this ship is quite as cracked as the Louisiana. In fact, I don't think it can be allowed to be. Otherwise, it would be unambiguously overpowered. The fact that the torpedoes hit for as little damage that they do, or as they do, I think is a decent balancing factor. The Louisiana has fewer torpedoes, but they hit a lot harder, and in my opinion, it feels worse to be dropped by Louisiana torpedoes than by Aki ones. But at the same time, the Louisiana doesn't enjoy the 32mm overmatch that the Aki does, so, you know, it's a bit of a trade-off. Anyway, we've sunk in this battle because we were spotted by the incomparable sonar. The GK shot us. Our teammates are going to clean up here, including this Dalian, who gets some nice little torpedo hits on the incomparable before that guy rams him. GG there. And then the GK that sunk us is on such low HP that he'll be able to be taken out in the span of 1 or 2 salvos by the friendly Tulsa. So we're going to win this battle with the 219,000 damage done, and we're going to have somewhere north of 2,000 base XP when all is said and done. Final thoughts on the Aki. I really don't like the design. I don't like the incentive to sit there and bow tank. I think if you've watched this channel for a long time, I think bow tanking as a strategy is sort of a last resort rather than a first priority, even though many people treat it that way. And I've explained why in previous videos. You'd be able to see if you watch some of my battleship guides, I suppose. But yeah, the Aki is not a ship that I personally think I'm going to be playing on a regular basis. I just don't like being so incentivized to rely on bow tanking and using the front guns. I say that, by the way, with some of my favorite ships in the game being things like the Nelson and the Rodney, which do have all their guns on the front, but the main difference between the Aki and those is that, comparatively, the Aki is an unmaneuverable brick. It's got a 20-second rudder shift time, a 900-meter turning circle. A Rodney and Nelson, while they are not fast, they do have much better turning circles and much better rudder shifts, so they allow for more maneuverability. They facilitate kiting a little bit better, which I think you need to do in favor of reversing from time to time. And the Aki makes it a little bit difficult to do that. I'll say also that the flight deck, for whatever reason, is coded in 32. So cue the tears of Louisiana crying with its 19mm plating on its flight deck. I don't know why that is. That seems a bit silly to me. The whole ship, frankly, is a little bit silly in my opinion. So I don't like it, but it's a good ship. That's the bottom line. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.